Cian, I suppose, yeah, as we said, the preparations continuing at pace for France next week, very much on the horizon now. Let's start with that Bundee Aki news yesterday. It emerged in the morning that he had been cut from the squad for disciplinary reasons, pending a hearing that was to come later. So the IRFU stepped in before that was even confirmed, subsequently getting a 4-match ban. It was a 6-match ban with 2 games suspended, so in effect 4 games. He'll miss the Connacht game this weekend, which he wouldn't have played it anyway. We've seen that before with various bans. And then Ireland's first 3 Six Nations games, which puts his participation in the tournament generally very much in doubt. The IRFU in a statement said that they do not tolerate any form of disrespect shown towards match officials, and they do not condone actions that fall below the standards expected of players representing Irish rugby. They also said they're investigating the matter internally themselves as well, which is interesting, not just kind of leaving it to the URC who dished out that ban. What's the fallout from that been? Like, I know you're over there now and it was a big story yesterday. Like, what's kind of your reaction to the whole thing?
Yeah, I think you make an interesting point, Will. The fact that the IRFU released a statement before the hearing had even taken place, which was quite unusual, really. My sense of that was they were trying to get out ahead of it. Obviously, we had the Mac Hansen incident last season, Johnny Sexton a couple of years ago as well, and I think they probably knew the severity of the likely ban that was going to come and wanted to be seen to make a statement, which they did really. It was quite a strongly worded statement. And as you said, Aki then got a 4 game ban. It's not his first time being in trouble for misconduct charge against the match officials. Back in 2017, I think it was, he got a 3 game ban for his behaviour around it while he was playing for Connacht as well. And look, it's something that we've spoken about across the various podcasts over the course of the season, I'd say, really, Will, that the discipline in Irish rugby has been a major issue for a long time. And I think the way that has fallen, and look, don't get me wrong, of course, Andy Farrell would much prefer if Bundee Aki was in his squad, but the way things have played out, I wouldn't be surprised if behind the scenes, at least, Andy Farrell is using this incident as a bit of a line in the sand moment to just say to the players that they need to cop on, really, the amount of whinging that's been going on to referees across the board. And obviously it spilled over after the game at the Dexcom Stadium last weekend. So pretty sour episode on which to start Ireland's Six Nations build-up.
Yeah, and in some ways, as you say, he's kind of an easy sacrificial lamb in the sense that, like, cutting him 4 or 5 hours before he was being banned anyway, they can like kind of, oh yeah, let's talk tough. You can't speak back to the match officials. I'll be fascinated to see if we get the full judgment, because there's been all sorts of talk as to the nature of his interactions with Owen Cross and the officials, and potentially some post-match kind of verbals as well. And I'm even curious that he got 2 games suspended. As you said, he has priors. I don't see what basis he would get any games suspended if he's had priors, and if the interactions, as the committee said, it constituted verbal abuse and disrespect. Like, that would seem to be fairly hefty. So there's kind of a few layers to it that will be interesting to follow. And the Johnny Sexton example as well has been used from a few years ago before the World Cup, when he obviously went after Jaco Piper and his team of officials post game when he wasn't even playing for Leinster in that Champions Cup final. It's funny, like, that process took 6 weeks. I was just looking up earlier, like, this Bundee Aki thing took less than 6 days. I still don't know why that Johnny Sexton one took so long, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I don't think this is done and dusted now that Bundy's gone.
Yeah, look, as you said, there's loads of layers to it. Like, so let's kind of take it step by step. He does have a serious rap sheet. Like I mentioned, in 2017, he was banned for his misconduct charge. He's also had 3 red cards in his career, which I'm sure counted against him. So I think you're spot on, Will. It would have been nice to have the full written judgment, because I'm not sure where the mitigation was in terms of the 2 games that were shaved off. But the mood here in the Ireland camp today, we've just spoken to Andrew Goodman, the backs coach, and he made it crystal clear that as soon as Bundee Aki's ban is over, which will be in time for the round 4 clash against Wales, that he's going to come right back into contention. Because I know a lot of speculation and people wondering, would this be the end of Bundee Aki in a green jersey? And look, if that had happened, I think it would have been a terrible way for probably Ireland's greatest foreign import to have bowed out on a brilliant career. But that doesn't sound like it's going to be the case. Now, whether or not Andy Farrell will recall Bundee Aki against Wales or against Scotland remains to be seen. But my sense is that he will certainly be back in the mix.
Yeah, like I don't think he would have started this next week anyway. Stuart McCluskey's played really well. I think he was likely going to be playing 12, but we've seen him deployed in the 23 jersey on a number of occasions. It would be foolish for Andrew Goodman to say anything other than what he said, I think, even though people might think, oh, it's such a bad incident, throw the book at him, leave him out. But if he's back for Wales and if McCluskey gets injured, like he did, he tweaked an injury after the All Blacks game despite playing well. Like it'd be foolish not to kind of use Bundee Aki if there's a position needed for him. Albeit he hasn't had a good season, so I actually think on form he probably wouldn't have been involved. Certainly in the starting team. And then the other kind of big news yesterday, Keane, was the Hugo Keenan news, which obviously there was hope that he would be back fit to play at full back, kind of mitigating some of the other injuries in the squad. He hadn't played since the Lions tour. He got a hip operation and had some treatment there, and then to fracture his thumb. And it seems, I was reading your article just before I came in, that he's getting some kind of guidance from a surgeon. That never sounds good. Hard to see him featuring in the Six Nations, and it opens up a whole pile of questions, not only who starts full back, but then what the makeup of the bench looks like as a knock-on effect to that. Like, what's your read on the Hugo Keenan situation and what might come out of it in terms of who plays 15?
Yeah, so my understanding, Will, is that he fractured his thumb in training on Tuesday, like a very innocuous incident. I think they were doing a passing drill and his thumb got caught in a jersey or something like that, or maybe it was a tackling drill, something really innocuous anyway. And yeah, just so unfortunate because I think all things being equal, I think Andy Farrell would have rolled the dice on Hugo Keenan's fitness if he had been 90% fit for next week. He's that important to the Ireland team. Of course, it would have been a risk in terms of his lack of game time this season, but I think it's a chance that Ireland would have taken. You're right, he's gone back to Dublin. He's going to see a surgeon. And like you said, once you hear the word surgeon, you're kind of thinking this is going to be possibly months rather than weeks. And just desperately, desperately unlucky for a guy who no doubt was itching to get back after not having played since the third lines test in the summer. So that's a big blow. There's no getting away from it from Ireland. It does throw up a really fascinating opportunity. I would see it as probably four contenders. I think Jacob Stockdale is right at the front of that queue. I think he's been playing excellent for Ulster this season. I still would have question marks whether fullback is his best position, particularly at test level. I think the left wing, he's far more comfortable, but I think in terms of form, pound for pound, I think he has deserved a shot. But Cian Frawley has been pretty good for Leinster at fullback in recent weeks. I know it's not his preferred position. Obviously, he's joining Connacht at the end of the season to get more game time at out half. Jamie Osborne hasn't played since injuring his shoulder last November. And look, we know how much Andy Farrell rates Jamie Osborne. Look at how well he played at fullback in South Africa a couple of years ago when no one really saw that selection coming. So would Andy Farrell take a risk on Osborne despite his lack of fitness? I think there's a good chance he might. And I think then a bit of a wild card option, I guess you could call it, would be Jack Crowley, who's obviously switched to fullback in the latter part of Munster's recent games and has done some good things there. Now, obviously, Jack Crowley is still very much in the race to start number 10. So while it's a big blow to lose Hugo Keenan, there are options. I'd be keen to get your sense on who do you reckon he might go for?
I think if Osborne is fit, maybe Osborne. I do agree with you on Stockdale. Like, he's been playing well. I would like to see him get an opportunity in a big game. But yeah, as you said, ideally that would come on the left wing. His last Six Nations start at full back was during COVID in the Stade de France. People might remember that was not a good day for him. He made a kind of a very bad blunder under a kick through, and it led to a French try. And kind of it was one of those moments that really marked out people's opinion that no, this is not a test level full back. That if you're going to find a place for him, it will have to be on the left wing. So it would be an interesting kind of full circle moment if he did get the nod at 15. I'd actually like to roll the dice actually on Stockdale and see what he can do. He's had a long road back into kind of contention and prominence, and he has had a good season. And he's a different kind of fullback to Hugo Keenan. His strengths are different to Hugo Keenan's strengths, and his weaknesses are different to Hugo Keenan's weaknesses. But it's hard to get a sense of what Andy Farrell will think. I feel like he does like Jamie Osborne. But yeah, like how fit is Jamie Osborne? Do we know? Like, I know he's kind of training away, but do we have an inkling if he's actually a live option for next week?
Yeah, I definitely think he is. Obviously, we'll get on and talk about Tadhg Furlong in a minute, but Tadhg Furlong was the only Ireland player, certainly from what I could see at training today, who wasn't involved. And I think the reality is, Will, I don't think Jamie Osborne would be here in Portugal if he wasn't a live contender for next week. And I think if Jamie Osborne had even one game under his belt with Leinster, I would be fairly confident that Andy Farrell would probably go for him, given how well he handled, particularly the second test in South Africa a couple of years ago. He played on the left wing, I think, didn't he? Or the wing at least, against France last year. And that didn't really go too well for him either. But he does have test experience at fullback, even if I do think 12 is probably his best long-term position. So, look, it's not like Andy Farrell doesn't have options. I think Kieran Frawley, like I said, is definitely a viable option as well. He's done some really good things for Leinster this season. Might lack the top end pace maybe required, particularly against a team like France next week, because I've no doubt that they're going to go after him, particularly in the air.
Yeah, I don't see Frawley or Crowley being realistic options. So no, they're realistic, but I just don't see them personally as viable options for this particular game for the reasons you outlined. Like France are so threatening. Hugo Keenan that's why Hugo Keenan would have been an ideal selection in some ways, because he covers the backfield so well. But in lieu of him, I would like to see maybe the dice rolled with Stockdale. As you mentioned, Tadhg Furlong there as well. Like, it's God, the hits just keep coming. Like, as in every time you think another blow can't befall the team injury wise, like Tadhg Furlong. And what was particularly worrying about today's update, Keenan, you'll know this, having talked to Andrew Goodman and heard from him, was that he mentioned that it was his other calf, not the kind of one that had given him trouble last year. It's like kind of his other calf, and I know you're putting so much weight through that part of your body when you're scrummaging, as he does. Didn't sound great. Training separately to the team 7 days out from the France game, like, look, that sounds unlikely that he'll be involved. Or what do you read on the latest update?
Yeah, that's 100% the sense on the ground here, Will. Look, we are still a week out, so there is time for Tadhg Furlong to prove his fitness. As far as I'm aware, the players will have a down day tomorrow. They're going to train here in the campus in Quinto del Lago on Sunday, and they're going to train on Monday as well before flying to Paris on Monday evening. So look, he does have a few more days to prove his fitness, but reading between the lines, I'd be very surprised at this stage if Furlong is going to be involved against France. I think there is a strong possibility that he'd be fit for Italy the following week. So look, for a scrum that's already coming into Six Nations under huge pressure, we can talk about the loose heads that are missing. To be without Tadhg Furlong going to Paris as well, it just puts enormous pressure on the scrum. Finlay Bealham has obviously come into camp carrying a bit of a knock. Now apparently he has overcome that and he'll be fit. Thomas Clarkson is another option, and Tom O'Toole, who is quite an interesting option, I think. Obviously, Ireland have looked to use him on the loosehead side in the past, and I do think he's a genuine option at loosehead for next week, but he hasn't been playing there for Ulster, so would it be too big of an ask to even have him on the bench covering loosehead? I'm not too sure. So
yes is the answer to that question. I just the idea of swapping him for France, if it was Italy or Wales or Scotland, I might say, oh, yeah, you can get away with that. But God, I'd rather go down with a sinking ship playing a real loose head than, kind of, because I remember like they put Bealham at loose head against Georgia, I think it was, in the Autumn Nations Cup during COVID, and it didn't go well. It's like these things theoretically sometimes sound like they're good ideas, but in practice when you see it, like the only time in recent years it's really worked is the Porter switch, really, like from tight head to loose head, and he had been a loose head originally, so I suppose the original switch was to tight head. That actually worked really well. He became a Lion and then got injured, but outside of that, like, you don't see it happening very often for a reason, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I just think that the Ireland coaches have been really keen, not just this week potentially, but they have been keen to look at O'Toole as a loose head. But as you said, I think there's a reason why Ulster haven't switched him back, and he's been excellent, by the way, as well this season for Ulster in the tight head side. So like he could potentially be in the match day 23 covering tight head as well. So without Furlong, yeah, like I said, a tall order I think becomes even taller. It's such a depleted front row.
What's your general sense over there? Like, I know that the players often put out very kind of convincing public faces. I remember when you guys were over in Japan ahead of the All Blacks game, like the guys were really on the kind of the full court press about how the training's never been sharper, we've never been better. Like, there is definitely a sense that, like, not only are Ireland in store for a loss in France, that it could potentially be a hiding. Like, considering who Ireland are missing, there's kind of like I feel like there's like a cloud has settled over, like ironically, because you're in Quinto del Lago and it's pissing down rain, like kind of a cloud has settled over this campaign already, and I'm feeling like it's hard to shake it. Like, Ireland are already gone out to like 13-point underdogs, which is unfathomable for a team that's been operating so high at the top of the world game for the last number of years. Like, there's a sense at this juncture that this could be an ugly game next week potentially. Like, is that a sense shared by you, or what are you getting on the ground over there?
Definitely not a sense of from talking to the players today, but they're not really gonna. If they're feeling that, they're not going to let the likes of me know, are they? Yeah, like my glass half full approach, Will, is that I think it's probably the best time to play France. Now, I'm fully aware that that could come back and look like a stupid comment next Friday. But like you, if you've been reading the French media, which I'm sure you have, there's a good sense of what the French team is going to be next week. And I look at the pack and the balance of the back five in particular, and I'm not sure it's the most balanced back five I've ever seen. It sounds like Miami Miafu is not going to be starting, which is a bit of a surprise. They're going to be playing Charles Olivon potentially in the second row. He played in the second row against Munster for Toulon 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, and I just don't think that's his best position. It sounds like Guillard is going to switch back from number 8 to his more preferred second row. They're missing a lot of quality as well, Will, through injuries. I know we're focusing a lot on Ireland, and look, they have incredible strength and depth, but I think like someone like Thibaut Flamont, I think is one of the most underrated second rows in world rugby. I think he's a massive loss. I still don't understand why Aldrit isn't in the squad. I think if he had been in the back row, I think he gives you much more balance. It sounds like it's going to be Francois Croix, who has only played, I think, 3 games this season due to a knee injury. Oscar Jegu, who is a brilliant player, and Anthony Gelanche, who is an excellent player as well. But they're all kind of back rows as opposed to out and out number 8. There's got, the Jalibert, Anton Dupont dynamic. Is that going to fire in all cylinders from the off? Possibly not. Ireland usually start campaigns quite well and have faded over the last couple of years. So I think that's the optimistic outlook for sure. Like if you're looking, I'm already looking at the weather forecast in France next week, and it looks like it's going to be rainy as well, because I think Ireland need to avoid scrums as much as possible. And obviously we'll get on and chat about Uini Atonio, but the France scrum, I think, is going to be licking their lips at the prospect of inflicting similar enough damage to what South Africa did last November. And that, for me, is a big concern, because I think it's Carl Dixon is the referee, and if Ireland get on the wrong side of him early on, it could be a very, very long night.
Yeah, no, I take your point on France. There are question marks there. Like, Galtier undoubtedly has taken a big risk with who he's left out. Like, if the performance isn't really good and if they don't win immediately, there's going to be huge sticks to beat him with, leaving out Penno, Aldred, Fiku. Albeit, Fiku probably hasn't been as good as he, maybe at his best in the last couple of years in the Bordeaux Centre partnership. I can see why it's tantalising to kind of unleash them on the international stage, but certainly there's some question marks there. It's just not as many question marks that it looks like from an Ireland perspective heading into next week. And the Dupont Jalibert thing is fascinating as well. Like if that clicks, it could be unplayable. Like if you watch what those two guys are able to do individually, but yeah, there is that sense that, like, I don't know if they get in each other's way, or does Dupont kind of monopoly of the ball? Does that take away Jalibert's maybe cutting edge? Like, we haven't necessarily seen them dovetail the way they do individually at their club levels as a collective, because it's always been Dupont and Entomac. So that will be a fascinating kind of subplot heading into next week.
And just to come in on that, Will, I think in a way Roman Entomac's game has kind of suffered over the last couple of years, because he's become almost like passive and a facilitator to allow Dupont, of course, like a generational talent, to do what he does. But I don't think Entomac, and I know he had that really bad injury, but I don't think he's been the player that he was when he first broke onto the scene. And it's not it's not as easy as just putting Jalibert in there, who's had a very feisty relationship with Galtier, let's not forget as well. But it's not as easy just plugging him in, because he, from what I gather, is very much an alpha as well. He wants to be the one who's controlling things. He wants to be the one who's running the show. So I think that dynamic in terms of how they gel, look, come round 4 or 5, they might be absolutely humming. But that's why I feel on the opening night, it might be a good time to play them. And like I said, I could have egg on my face by making such a statement, but I look at Jalibert's try that he scored. I don't know if you saw that, Will, for Bordeaux last week. The guy is just playing sensational rugby, and if he clicks, yeah, it could be a tough night for Ireland. But I'm taking the glass half full approach for now, because there is a lot of negativity. I would agree with you, and pessimism around the trip to Paris next week.
No, but I'm glad because one of my things I've written down on my sheet was reasons to be positive question mark, and because there's been very few kind of things given in chats like myself, Rudd and Luke did one on Monday, and it was kind of a list of red flags almost. But it's hard to see the wood from the trees a little bit, as as you say, even since that show, everything I listed at the start, that only came in the last 24 hours. So it's kind of a moving story as we go on and on. But yeah, but the French thing is interesting. Like there's almost something such thing as I think as having too much depth. Like sometimes when Ireland say we're going really well in like 23, 22, 23 region, like they didn't have a huge pool of players, and Andy Farrell kept a fairly tight leash on who started, but there was a kind of a clarity that came with that, and when everyone was humming, there was kind of a certainty of who was being selected. Whereas with France and this squad, like getting rid of Peno, like there's no earthly kind of planet where Ireland would be dumping a player like that. And sometimes there's criticism in Ireland that we hold on to guys for too long, but Jesus, Peno's still in his 20s, and the idea that he'd be cut aside, and I know there's talk about his attitude maybe and some defensive stuff, but to not even have him in the squad is big. And as you said, Aldred, Fiku, like these guys, and I know they have a lot of talent in France, so it can be maybe tempting to kind of upset the apple cart and get rid of some of these guys as well. But I'm thinking, I'm kind of unsure. I'm not unsure. I think he's made bad decisions. Sorry.
He's made a rod for his own back, and even though France are Six Nations champions, Galtier is not universally popular in France. And I think if the selection decisions, and I would agree with you, I think it's more so Peno and Aldred as opposed to Fiku. But if it backfires, I think he will come under serious pressure. And you made an interesting point, Will, about the centres who it looks like are going to start Yoram Moefana, Nicolas Deporter, two Bordeaux players. And if they're playing outside of Jalibert, surely it would make sense to have the two Bordeaux wingers in terms of LBB, of course, and Damien Penaud on either side. So that to me makes the decision even more puzzling. Now, look, it sounds like Theo Adesogbe is going to come in and start. He is a class young player. But the idea to drop your record try scorer who is still in the peak of his powers is bizarre. And like I said, if it backfires, I think Galtier will come under enormous pressure in France.
Yeah, because like we talk a lot about how Ireland peaked in 2023. You could argue that this France group peaked in 2023 as well. Like that's what when they had that home World Cup and they looked great guns. Like since then. Look at the team that played in that quarter final. Like, guys like Cyril Bay, who won't be playing this weekend. Uini Atonio, who has to retire, sadly, that we might touch on a bit more depth in a minute. Like the Marshall Mavaka 1-2 punch. I know Mavaka's had injuries and stuff like that. Like Aldrid's now gone. Peno's now gone. The Dante Fiku centre partnership at the time was really, really good. And Ntamak, as you mentioned earlier, was playing great rugby at the time. Remember, he scored that unbelievable try against La Rochelle. Yeah, I just feel like they haven't been as good either. Like they had a lost year in 2024 when Dupont was at sevens. They rebounded to win the Six Nations last year, but even then, it also featured a dreadful loss to England. They kind of sacked off the summer tour and lost 3-0 to New Zealand. They got trounced by South Africa at home, so they're under a lot of pressure too. I know we've actually spoken about France for a fair bit now, but they're one of the key protagonists in this tournament as well, and I think they're under a fair bit of pressure themselves.
Yeah, but they are champions and they are favourites for a reason. And we have kind of glossed over the fact that Dupont is back. I mean, he obviously hasn't played for France since he injured his knee against Ireland in last year's Six Nations, because France didn't have a great November campaign either. A bit like Ireland, were good in fits and starts, but the difference that Dupont will make, it's a Thursday night in Paris. Can you imagine the reception he's going to get? And I think, even though we almost take for granted, I think, how good he is, I don't think we should gloss over the difference that he's going to make to France next week. It's going to be absolutely huge.
Yeah, he's hit the ground running with Toulouse. He's been absolutely electric in the games I've seen him play anyway. So between now and team announcement Tuesday, is there anything to keep an eye out for? What I'm wondering what the next news report will be, and what's the latest twist ahead of next week. Like, it'll be fascinating to see what team is announced. Like, obviously, Loosehead will be a big selection talking point. Tyburn is kind of being bandied about as maybe starting at number 6, which would allow McCarthy and Ryan to start at second row. Out half is always a debate. It looks like the centres are fairly well mapped at this stage of McCluskey and Ringrose. Like, what team selection-wise are you looking out for ahead of next week?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the big selections are Loosehead, depending on Tadhg Furlong's fitness. tight head, fullback, and out half. My sense, like it's a very early sense, but just from being on the ground, the bits and pieces that I saw training, is that I think Sam Prendergast is in pole position to start at out half. I have a feeling that Edwin Adogbo is going to be involved. I would say most likely off the bench. I think the makeup of the bench is going to be quite interesting, whether Ireland excuse me, go for a 6-2. I know you said you weren't expecting Bundee to be involved, but I think if he had not been suspended, there was a good chance he might have been wearing number 23, because we know Andy Farrell likes to go for a big centre. But with Henshaw injured, with Aki suspended, with McCloskey and Ringrose likely to start, I wonder if Ireland will be tempted to go for a 6-2 bench, and you could have guys like a Dogbo, like Jack Conan, potentially a Nick Timoney or a Cian Prendergast to come off the bench, because France could go with a 6-2 as well. I think otherwise, yeah, the team pretty much picks itself. Doris, Van der Fleer, Tadhg Byrne in the back row. I know there's been a few calls maybe to pair Edwin Adogbo and Joe McCarthy in the second row together to go with that power punch, but I'm not quite sure. A bit like I kind of said, the balance of the French team, I'm not quite sure that would be the right balance. And I think, we've talked about the scrum, but the Irish line-out has also been under huge pressure, and I think the line-out would really suffer if you didn't have a natural jumper like a James Ryan in that second row. But I think Adogbo could be primed, Will, for a big, big impact in Paris. I mean, you look at how well he's played for Munster, particularly in those Champions Cup games against Toulon and Cass. Look at the impact that he made off the bench in 20 minutes by scoring the 2 tries. I'm very, very excited. It feels like it's been a long time coming for him. He's missed like 2.5 years of rugby with back-to-back Achilles injuries, and Munster have managed him very, very carefully in terms of his minutes. But we actually spoke to him after Andrew Goodman at the press conference earlier. We'll have a piece up tomorrow and in the paper. It was actually my first time chatting to him, and just like being up close and seeing him, God, like however big you think he is when he's on TV, like seeing him in person, he is a big, big unit. And I think if his body plays ball and he stays fit, I think he's going to be a massive, massive player for Ireland over the next few years. It's just like I said about staying fit. So they're the things to watch out for. It was funny, Andy Farrell came over and had a chat with us before training started, and kind of, talking about how mad yesterday was in terms of the news cycle, Hugo Keenan fracturing his thumb, and he kind of quipped that, well, this is only our second pitch session of the week, so what is it going to be like by the time we get to Paris? So they'll have a few more tough sessions on the pitch before they get there. The hope is that there are no more injuries, because I think, back to my glass half full approach, Will, it's a good time to be able to see the depth chart in certain positions. Like a lot of supporters, a lot of our listeners will be crying out to see not so much of the tried and tested guys. Well, we're going to see lots of them in Paris. We're going to see whether they can handle it. And with one eye on the World Cup next year, that might be no bad thing at all.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's funny, like Adogbo, as you said, has been, well mapped. He made his Munster debut a while ago, but because of those injuries, he kind of went out of sight, out of mind for a while. And as you said, the kind of glimpses we've seen this year, as you say, managed minutes, I think it's a perfect time to unleash him off the bench. I think starting him would be a huge ask, considering he hasn't started a huge amount of big games, but I love the idea of him coming on in the second half. And like, the French won't be familiar with him. The French won't. I know he played Cass last weekend, but like the French won't at large know his game, and he could be that kind of little bit of an X factor that Ireland kind of could do with.
Yeah, for sure. And his brother obviously made his debut for Munster last week, got man of the match. He's going to be starting, I think, again for Munster against is it Glasgow that they're playing, and he could have a big, big future as well. Another guy I think to mention, Will, is who is not going to be involved next week as far as we're aware, because he's a development player, but Bryn Ward apparently has been tearing up trees in the first couple of sessions over here. Just chatting to Jack Conan, and he was saying like he is seriously impressed by him. I was chatting to Stuart McCloskey as well, and he was saying, he was comparing him to Sean O'Brien actually. So this guy is a serious talent, and by all accounts has been making all the right noises in training this week, and I wouldn't rule out a potential debut for him maybe later on in the Six Nations. I think as it stands, the plan is for him to go back to Ireland at the end of the week to be involved in that Ireland 15 game against England A on tomorrow week on Friday in Thomond Park. But if he's going as well as it sounds like in these early stages, yeah, I think he's certainly one to be watching as well.
Yeah, he's had a great season. That game against Munster in particular caught the eye. Yeah, lastly, we mentioned Uini Atonio there. Like, very sad news and shocking news yesterday. La Rochelle just tweeted out from their account, the prop. I think everyone listening will be familiar with his battles with Leinster over the years and with Ireland as well. They tweeted, Uini Atonio was admitted yesterday to the La Rochelle Hospital Centre following suspicion of a cardiac issue. Medical examinations confirmed a heart attack. His condition is stable today and he remains under supervision in intensive care. It is now established that he will not be able to continue his playing career. So at the age of 35, in his 15th La Rochelle season, remarkably, Uini Atonio has had the very kind of shockingly called time in his career. An amazing story, first of all. Like, he's from New Zealand originally. He was playing at a rugby 10s tournament in Hong Kong in 2011, where he was spotted by the then La Rochelle coach Patrice Colazo, who now coaches Racing. They brought him over and immediately he started playing for them and kind of becoming a key man. Like, he's been there from the very, very start of the La Rochelle rise. They got promoted, I think it was in 2013 or 14. They got promoted to the top 14, and he's with them all the way up to their 2 Champions Cup wins a couple of years ago. And he's keen, I suppose in Ireland we probably know him as well as any other country other than France because of all the battles. And I've always found him to be a very kind of likeable guy. I've actually never heard the guy speak, but he still has that personality about him, just his kind of aura, the size of him. And in particular, when Rog came in, I think Rog kind of got him even better. He got a little more mobile, a bit more nimble. His handling is very, very good. Kind of similar to Tadhg Furlong a little bit with his handling. I was very, very sad to see this news yesterday. Shocking news. Obviously hoping he just recovers first and foremost, but then from a rugby standpoint, awful.
Yeah, and from what I hear, Will, like, he actually had a very lucky escape in terms of finding it, the issue when he did, that he could have been looking at, even worse problems. So I think fair play to all the medical staff who picked up on that, relatively early so that he could get the medical attention that he needed. But yeah, completely shocking. I mean, if anyone hadn't heard, he pulled out of La Rochelle's top 14 game at the weekend in the warm-up. He was due to play in that, and I think he would have been playing against Ireland next week as well. I think particularly because all the issues around Ireland's scrum, Will, that we've just outlined, the success that he's had against Ireland, whether it's been with La Rochelle against Leinster or Munster, I think Galthié would have been very tempted to start Uini Atonio. So that's how relevant he still is. I think you're right. I think if we were to talk to La Rochelle fans, I think they would probably say he's been their best ever player, purely because he's been there from the start and their rise, like you said. And funny you should say that, you've never heard him speak. I actually met him and interviewed him at the 2015 World Cup when Ireland played France in that pool game. I remember it was in the Vale of Glenmorgan, where the Welsh rugby team are based. And honestly, I've never seen a human as large. I know I just spoke there about how big a dogbo is up close and personal. Uini Atonio is just a different level altogether. And certainly my impression of that all those years ago was that he was a bit of a gentle giant. He was really softly spoken, a very nice guy, you'd have to say as well. And I think reading the various tributes, I think it was really telling, Will, the amount of, I saw Munster and Leinster, the IRFU putting out different tweets. I saw different players paying their respects. And I think he seems to have been universally liked, even though I would imagine, particularly for Looseheads, he must have been one of the most difficult opponents they'd ever face in terms of scrummaging, the sheer size and weight of the man. And yeah, look, it's desperately sad on a human level. Fingers crossed he can make a full recovery. But it's terrible for French rugby. It's terrible for La Rochelle rugby, because I know he's 35 and his best years are behind him, but I still think you could get, 40 minutes from him, 30 minutes. Like I said, I fully expected him to be involved next week against Ireland. And I suppose it's the end of an era in many ways, isn't it? That La Rochelle team are kind of come towards their end. They're having a really difficult season in the top 14. They've dropped down to the Challenge Cup. And I think guys like Uini Atonio, Will Skelton were obviously at the forefront of the height of their success under Ronan O'Gara. And yeah, just a really, really sad way for him to bow out. But look, there's bigger things in rugby, Will, isn't there? And his health is the most important thing. And look, he's in the right place, hopefully getting all the care he needs.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of being a gentle giant, and I know he's like a beloved figure in La Rochelle. Like I was over at the Munster game last season, and he's recently opened like a steakhouse in the city, and I went there for dinner. No surprise, they serve steaks like the size of my head. Like, they're absolutely huge. Like, a man who obviously knows a good steak. You can get Uini Atonio's beer there. It's like a shrine to Uini Atonio. So at least he has something maybe for his post-rugby life. If anyone's over in La Rochelle for a game rating, go out to Uini Atonio's restaurant for sure. They'll take good care of you out there. So yeah, very sad news. Wishing them all the best. So Cian, what's your run of it now for the next couple of days ahead of next week? You're in Portugal, then when are you going to Paris?
So yeah, we're going to Paris on Monday, Will, same as the Ireland team. We're going to have another press conference on Sunday. We'll get the latest update on the likes of Tadhg Furlong, anyone else who might be picking up knocks between now and then. So there'll be a press conference on Sunday, and on a red-eye flight Monday morning to get to Paris, get set up there. And yeah, one thing to look out for people next week is that the team announced, and obviously everything is thrown out of kilter because of the Thursday evening game. So the Ireland team is going to be named on Tuesday, but it's going to be named very early in the morning, I think around 9 a.m. Irish time. So that's obviously a bit unusual. It's normally in the afternoon, so people should keep an eye out for that. But look, we'll have plenty of coverage, Will, between now and then. So despite the storm that's here, the show goes on.
The show goes on, and we will be at the Helix tomorrow night. Forgot to mention this at the top of the show, so hopefully you're all still listening. And anyone who hasn't bought tickets yet, there's a small number available. Go to thehelix.ie. Tomorrow night it will be Joe Malloy, Ian Madigan, Eddie O'Sullivan, and in a left wing crossover, myself and Luke Fitzgerald, as well as Sinead Hassan. So it's going to be a very packed couch in part two, to say the least. But so much rugby knowledge there. You don't want to miss out. So that'll be tomorrow night in the Helix. We'll be back next week with so much rugby coverage, as Cian alluded to there. The game is on Thursday, but there's plenty happening early in the week as well. Cian, thanks so much for joining us.
Cheers, Will. Sorry to miss the live show tomorrow, but it sounds like it's going to be brilliant. Good luck with it.